there is a risk we take when we fantasize about a goal. And it's a lovely thing. I mean, we hear a lot about, ooh, visualize, your success. I don't know why, but it has to be said in that voice. But like, imagine the good, like, of course, we want to we want to imagine it. But sometimes what happens is we imagine the cool thing. Like we imagine getting and picking up and moving and getting a place on the island, or we imagine moving or trying for a new job or getting on a dating app or whatever the thing is you're longing to do. And in the imagining of it, they are called positive fantasies, is that we feel just enough of that kind of little lift inside of us to imagine it, that we feel satisfied enough that we will put it aside, tuck it to bed, and then go on with our lives for longer than like what is needed for action. Like a bucket list is great if you capture your ideas, if you attach dates to them. But if you have a bucket list, which is just this repository for your dreams, that to me sometimes can get even riskier because it's that, oh, okay, so this is just a list of stuff now that you're giving yourself permission to do, not now, but later. Is there a reason that you can't start some of them today?
Jody, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, Chase, I'm so excited to be here with you.
We are, where's here? You're in Canada, is that right?
Yeah, I'm visiting my dad for his birthday. I'm in Toronto in a hotel room, but normally I would be sitting in Palm Springs. That
Oh,
would be where I'd be sitting.
that's a pretty nice place to be sitting. This time of year, it's pretty hot down there because we are in the summer, and you have just released a new book that I am fascinated by. I have had many serendipitous happenings in and around your book. But before we get into the book, please do us all with introducing yourself in your own words. I just shared your illustrious bio with the listeners, but tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you, and where do you focus your attention in your work and career, the stuff that you share with us?
Okay, happy to. Yes. Who is this woman? Well,
Hmm.
I affectionately, not too hopefully weirdly, refer to myself sometimes as the Grim Reaper's cheerleader. Before that sounds entirely turn offy, don't wait, hold on, don't go, don't leave the podcast because I've become very ultra motivated by this idea about how mortality can be the motivator to kick us into gear, to snap us out of autopilot and start focusing on this life we actually really want to live rather than postpone. So as you
Hmm.
said earlier, yeah, I founded 4,000 Mondays because we roughly get 4,000 of those weeks in our lifetime. And so I've been hell bent really on making it the thing I do. I speak, I do workshops for groups and teams and meetings and kickoffs, and I write about it. And so if I'm not doodling about it or writing about it or talking about it, something's wrong. Maybe I'm dead.
Maybe you have died.
Yes, that's the
Well,
end. It's an
I do,
indication.
I do love a little twist on death, and it happens to be a really strong motivator, right? The fact that
Mhm.
we do only get one life. I often share with the community that's listening and watching right now about this one precious life. Um, Curious to know how you
Yeah.
got started on this vector, because it is not I know a handful of people who deal with grief and with death and or trauma, and we've had them on the show, and it's always really, really insightful. But
Yeah.
with each of those different folks that I know, there was something that helped them get acquainted with that. It wasn't just a
Mm.
curiosity. There was usually some event. And I'm wondering, how did you get on this tip that, hey, we only live once, and this turns out this is a really um, amazing motivator? What was it? Was it just
Mm.
some insight? Was it a specific event? Help us understand it.
Yeah, I would say it's kind of the confluence of a few things. The boring part is just that I've always found it fascinating, this absurdity that we all work so hard to love our lives, even just like our lives on some days, and then poof, we're all going to be gone. I mean, that always struck me as unique and odd, and I was
Hmm.
collecting all of the stoic quotes over the years, just finding it interesting. But I would say the real impetus, just story-wise, would be that my mom died when she was 58 from a heart attack. And it wasn't that she died, which obviously was shitty and unfortunate, love you, mom. But it was more that she died with my perception of having just a crap ton of regrets, of dreams and goals and ideas and things that she didn't take any action on. So, like when I was cleaning up her place after she died, Every drawer, Chase, was full of, oh, here's another business idea, or here's another manuscript, or oh, I remember she was working on that, or oh, all these things that she just didn't have the courage really to execute on. And it struck me deep into my own chicken-hearted soul that like, oh, this apple don't fall too far from the tree. Like that's my inclination is sometimes to
Yeah.
dream and maybe not do. And it struck me like number one, would love to not die early, but I don't want to die with all these dreams stuffed with me, like taking them to the grave too. So that for me was a huge wake up call of like, this life is precious and we could go at any minute. I mean, hopefully we get our 4,000 Mondays and change. But even if, however many we get, like we deserve to do it justice. And so that just really sparked a passion in me.
And that led to 4,000 Mondays, this realization we have 4,000 weeks.
Hmm.
Many of us
Yeah.
have probably seen there are like maps that you can buy that, you basically highlight the 4,000 different weeks and you're just putting an X in one as everyone goes by and you get to see what 4,000 look
Yeah.
like and you get to see the number of X's. And if you needed any
Yeah.
motivation, my goodness, that's powerful. But you write and speak
Mm-hmm.
and share at great
Mm-hmm.
depth about this. This part of what I was attracted to your work around is
Mm-hmm.
essentially it's very tactical. It's like
Mm-hmm.
how to get going in a world where you
Yeah.
are stuck. You referred to yourself just a moment ago, which was a funny word, and also there's a lot embedded there. Chicken hearted.
Mm-hmm.
Like where does that come from? And are these techniques and the information that you share? And again, you've got a great book that I'm going to highlight real quick here. You Only Die Once: How to Make It to the End with No Regrets.
Mm-hmm.
Very compelling title and sub. But start talking to us about this chicken-hearted part of you that realized that you
Yeah.
needed to take the bull by the horns.
Right out.
Because Mother Nature is undefeated, by the way.
Yeah, she's got a good track
Undefeated.
record.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Undefeated.
it's on the horizon. Yeah. Well, I speak honestly from my own, big lofty goals and plans and ideas. Okay. And so one example would be even like the book. So
Mhm.
this idea about, so I went to school and studied this stuff. I went and studied positive psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. And it was just a dream year that was actually part of my own transformation in my own business because I was doing leadership development and coaching. And I was trying to find a way to make this mortality thing fly. I was like, how do I talk about people and not completely turn them off? Like, how
Mhm.
do I not get fired from every gig I get hired to
Yeah.
motivate or to work with a team and start talking? I mean, I can't just come in and, cold. And so I went to school and studied it, and that gave me the confidence about, well, it can be scientifically based. Like if there's an empirical background, which I'm just going to give you like the tiniest dose of non-boring science, I think. And the notion that all this is based in is called temporal scarcity. And it's this idea that whenever you have a thing, an asset, and you see and you become more aware that it's rare or that it's going to be like a limited time only situation,
Mhm.
your perception of its value just like blows through the roof because you're like, well, whoa, like this yellow diamond is rare or whatever your I'm looking here at my Starbucks cup, like your pumpkin spice latte, which I would never get, by the way. I have some taste. But like life, like, holy shit, if we get 4,000 weeks, and I get fanatical about counting, and I would love to bully you into counting your Mondays with me. But like if I've got 1,813, which is true this week, maybe left, that is this kick in the pants to go, okay. Like if I go back to, for example, with the book, like you said you want to do it. And I've become very clear on this difference between leading an all talk, no action kind of life and the kind of life worth living, which is different for all of us. Like, I'm not here to tell you I found the prescription of the life you should live. Like, who am I to tell you? Like, you decide how many bells and whistles or how much fun you have or how much meaning you have. And we have a framework to look at that. But when the temporal scarcity thing jolts in, and when you start to go, okay, the X is on my calendar, like you said, or this proverbial hourglass, like I have less granules in the top of my hourglass than I do in the bottom. And I like that's the thing. They go, honey bunny, like this book ain't gonna write itself. Or the business thing, and like the people that I work with in workshops, we all have dreams, some of them way more than others in our souls.
Mhm.
But then my big question in a hopefully non-threatening way that I try very hard not to grab people by the throat. Shoulders works. To shake people by the shoulders, I feel like that's socially acceptable. But if I grab them by the throat, less acceptable. But like, what are you waiting for? Like, Don't
Yeah.
wait, you know? So that's kind of like the overview of where the science works and how it actually gets me going too. Like I need this reminder daily just as much as I think the rest of us do. So I don't pretend to have all this stuff solved. It's about a consistent reminder, which is the way that death reflection works. You don't just do, we all know, like every single one of your listeners here, hello, like we all know we're dying, but we
Yeah.
need the reminder. And so that's where I think we can have some fun with it and use it.
You mentioned Stoicism. Ryan
Mm,
Holiday is a good friend. He's done a great job of repopularizing that ancient wisdom. And there's a phrase in Stoicism, memento mori, which is
yes.
essentially remember that you're going to die. And
Hmm.
was your work, you mentioned, being aware of those things, but
Hmm.
how did you essentially wrap your arms around this thing? Like, this is what I'm going to do, because the difference of being inspired by this idea
Hmm.
and by the passing of your mother at a relatively early young age. I
Hmm.
There's a difference between being inspired and then deciding that this is actually this is the backstory, the
Yeah.
raison d'etre for this business, for my coaching
Uh,
business, for my writing business, for my workshops, to actually,
yeah.
to be at the core of it. And it seems like there's something else in there. That's a big leap. How, why,
Hmm.
what? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I get where you're going, Mr. Entrepreneur. I see you. I get you. Like, how does this work? Because
Yep.
like that was my conundrum. So that was one of the big things that held me back. I mean, that in addition to just good old fashioned, the deep-seated fear of rejection and failure. Oh, those things. But
Hmm.
like that this is my version of the override is memento mori. It's like remember, and I litter my place everywhere I go, except for hotel rooms, with skulls and the memorabilia. Never mind, I got a skull here. I'm always wearing one, a skull that will help to remind me. And this even
Wow.
says memento mori. I had it made. Like it's always on me and reminding me. So here I was. Okay, so I left my corporate gig, which was 17 years in length, and I kind of got out alive and kicking. Whew. By the skin of my teeth, let me tell you. And then here I am. I'm starting this business, and it's feeling good. And here's the thing: it was feeling fine, in life when it's like
Hmm.
it's good, and you always have that little niggling, like, yeah, I think I know I want more. And
Hmm.
and I knew I wanted more memento mori, but like I said, fear ruled the day because I couldn't fathom the way to make this work. So here's what I did. I made a workshop. I just said, okay, try something on for size. Like give it a go and see how it resonates. Or if it's like a lead balloon, it doesn't take off. So I did it and it was pretty good. It was in front of a room full of welcoming women in a women's group, but it was good. And I thought, okay, I found a way to not, formally offend people. And then, like I said, when I went to school and studied it, it gave me confidence, which I think is just certainly the root for those of us back to the chicken heartedness. Like we just
Yeah.
sometimes just need a dose of that in order to inoculate and be like, I'm going to do it anyways. So that there's one part that. So one part was education, confidence. One part was then the get up, like build something and do it. And then here, this is just the funny thing to me is like once I got into it, have you ever had this? I learned about it and I got so swept off my feet that it was so clear to me that I couldn't not do it.
Mm.
You know that feeling when you're just like, it's like when you're you're full on in love, like with
Yeah.
you just can't not like this is it then. So I made the big decision to leave my business partner at the time, where we were doing a lot of great successful work with corporations in the more traditional route.
Hmm.
I said, I have to do this now. So the more I built stuff, the more people were kind of warming onto it. I did a TEDx talk that did pretty well, like, which is cool. And that for me was also a proof point. Like,
Hmm.
I think people want to talk about this. This
Yeah.
taboo is exciting and horrifying. And if I can find a way, and one of the ways that I defang death, as I call it, is like I do doodle. Like, if you can doodle the Grim Reaper doing silly things, you can kind of say anything. So, so I package it with all the silliness that I have in my soul and the doodling. And I was like, okay, but if I put some science into this, it's not just frivolous. And so I feel like that package, along with just bizarro now, like passion and dedication, it's sort of like, oh, this train's taken out of the station. And thankfully people are curious about it. Like you said, you've had conversations all week about it.
Yeah, which is fascinating. I wanted to share the idea of it's, we talk about all the ways that we can live our lives, and yet that that has this almost the antithetical effect, in that it's like, truly, we have, we can do a million things, and there's always time. I noticed that Oliver
Mm,
Berkman blurbed your book,
mhm,
which I like his book on time, which is also called 4,000 Weeks, I think. The idea
mhm, yeah,
that living is this rich, zesty thing where we get to play out our fantasies, and when you juxtapose it with death,
yeah,
as again I mentioned, I've had 3 separate conversations in the last 10 days about this topic, which is like, yeah, but you only die once,
mm,
and that is forever. It is this arresting idea that I think
mhm,
that's why it's the Stoic phrase memento mori has been popularized. It is a wild motivator, and yet
mm,
there is this space, as you just
mhm,
highlighted in your own experience, between a lot of planning, a lot of talk,
mhm, yeah,
and no action.
mhm,
So right now there's someone who's listening to the show. They're
mhm,
on a jogging path or sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, whatever, and we are in their ears. And they, like most of those folks that we know, and yourself and myself included, they have dreams.
yeah,
And those dreams are always tagged with someday.
yeah,
So for that person who's listening right
yeah,
now,
yeah,
I want you to coach them
yeah,
as to why right now is the time.
yeah, yeah. I'm fascinated by this. The someday notion, and it's been said many times, like someday I'll, the island of someday.
Mhm.
I get curious whenever I hear this, and I get curious whenever I say it to myself. Okay, let's try and parse this out. Is this delay, because that's what it is, it's a delay, is it rooted in reality, which is that no, I actually have to wait till I retire before I move to Greece? Okay, for example,
Mhm. Sure.
which oftentimes there are legitimate reasons why we can't do the things we want to do. I understand that.
Sure.
But you can
I've
already tell
got
maybe
a
where I'm going
yeah,
with this.
totally. I got kiddos in high school or whatever. You got responsibilities. I understand.
Exactly. So sometimes circumstances do exist. I'm not, completely out to lunch. But where I'm going with this is that I want us to interrogate reality and say, how much of this dream that I'm deferring, this existence I'm postponing, is it because there's an actual circumstance that I need to work around versus fear, versus discomfort, and versus the fact that if I was to try to find a way to move to get a little place on a cool little island off Seattle, or if I was to find a way to try to sketch again, or to learn how to speak Italian, or to do something that it actually represents a change in my life that I'm actually a little bit like nervous to make, or maybe it means that I have to come up with like a negotiation with my spouse about, well, I'm going to be out of the house every Saturday morning, and what's that going to do to the whole routine? If I go and take the pottery class that I want to take, or what if it means that I really want to go back to school and I apply and I don't get in, and I'm not really in the mood for that kind of rejection. So I think I'm just going to go continue to live my life with one day I'm going to apply, quote unquote, when I have more time or have more money. I mean, so I think that if we just get real with ourselves, and this is just a flavor I do not like I do not like this taste personally in my mouth, but it is very true. I think a lot of the times when we are saying someday, it is because, we fall on very reasonable excuses that we don't have time or we're waiting for work to die down. Well, you know what? Like, let's just wait for that day to come when work's dying down. Because if your work is dying down, it means that there may be some other issues going on. Sometimes it's a good indication, but so I just want us to get deeply suspicious, and not so that we then feel bad about ourselves and judge ourselves. Like, here I go again, not taking action, but to be able to use that as, okay, you know what? I acknowledge that I'm scared, but and why might I be scared? Because what could this, like, if you're scared, it means that the stakes are maybe high, right? You see a lot of this in the work you do, right? With people. Like, what percent do you think it is versus actual legit circumstance? Like, I need to save 70,000 more dollars to do the thing versus
Ooh.
I'm just kind of squeamish to do it.
Oh. Real numbers, real talk.
Oh, let's
90
just do
10.
it.
90 10.
I
It really is.
mean,
It's 10
but we're all
10%.
chicken hearted.
Totally, 10%. But this is why this conversation is important, because the fact that we are all chicken-hearted, and yet there are people that we look up to, our neighbors, friends, um, people on the internet that are living some version of the dream that we aspire to for ourselves. We can see it.
Yeah.
And yet
Yes.
there is
Yes.
something that's keeping us from taking action. And
Mhm.
I do believe that it's 90-10, or you could get
Mhm.
90% of the way there if you made, 10 big improvements in your life, even if you
Mm.
do have the constraints of you still have kids in high school or whatever the thing is. Like
Yeah.
these are so often not legit blockers that we have. They're stories that we have
Yep.
told ourselves. And
Yes.
if I'm going 90-10, I don't know,
Yeah.
what's your
Yeah. I,
thought?
I'm right with you. I guess I'm just super, super excited that we are we're kindred spirits with that ratio. I also, as you're saying this, it's reminding me of research that I remember finding horrifying that I learned in my grad school program, and I always come back to it because I know I suffer from this. There is a risk we take when we fantasize about a goal, and it's a lovely thing. I mean, we hear a lot about, ooh, visualize, your success. I don't know why, but it has to be said in that voice. But like, imagine the good. Like, of course, we want to imagine it. But sometimes what happens is we imagine the cool thing. Like we imagine getting and picking up and moving and getting a place on the island, or we imagine moving or trying for a new job, or getting getting on a dating app, or whatever the thing is you're longing to do. And in the imagining of it, they are called positive fantasies, is that we feel just enough of that kind of little lift inside of us to imagine it, that we feel satisfied enough that we will put it aside, tuck it to bed, and then go on with our lives for longer than like what is needed for action. And this comes down to how we will just dupe ourselves out of reaching our goals because we get just enough of that little dopamine feeling of, ooh, it's going to feel so good when I do it. And I want us to then again be suspicious. Like you'd think, like in my world, I am very I don't know, 50-50 on a bucket list. Like a bucket list is great if you capture your ideas, if you attach dates to them. But if you have a bucket list, which is just this repository for your dreams, that to me sometimes can get even riskier because it's that, oh, okay, so this is just a list of stuff now that you're giving yourself permission to do, not now, but later. And then back to the
Mhm.
90-10, where it's like, is there a reason that you can't start some of them today? And the truth is, because like we're using some examples that are pretty grandiose, and I know that they're hard to execute. It's not easy to move your whole family, to the West Coast necessarily. But I also think we tell, like you used the word earlier, the stories we tell ourselves, and these are just sort of the societal things or these responsibility notions, like, why I can't do that. That's for other people to do. But back to what's the only thing that's going to grab you? It's that life's short. Like we keep thinking that we've got this sort of infinite amount of time to make it happen later, but we all know it's a joke. And so this to me is the only thing I have found in all the work I've done in the, years of coaching at different levels and different types of people. It's that this is the scarcity play. I wish we could talk about abundance and have that be motivating enough. It's just not. Unless there's a rare few, there's some rare birds out there that are just totally self-motivated to do everything. And then like, what, good for them. High five to you. And the rest of us do need a little bit of a kick. So this is the kick. It's like, do you want to get to your deathbed and feel like you always wanted, to move to Paris somehow and that you never made it happen? What would that feel like? And that to me is an exercise I think is really important to do. It's itemize. If you were reclined tonight, there'd be lots of morphine. So it would feel really good. But if you were looking back on your life and you were thinking about the stuff that you wished you had taken action on that you didn't, I feel like that's an exercise. Capture everything, even if it's the smallest little thing, even if it's the biggest things. And those are pregrets. And I know it's a cheesy word, but these are regrets in the making. They haven't happened yet. And you do not have more. I mean, you shouldn't have morphine coursing through your veins, I guess, tonight. But if you're there lying back, like you're not dead yet. So why not then look at it and go, well, there's no reason why I can't go and apply for that course. Or there's no reason, okay, fine, I'm kind of busted. Let me go and research what it would take to go and maybe apply for that residency or to, again, learn how to speak Spanish. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah,
You
please.
are,
I'm
you
here for
are,
it.
okay. You're super motivated. You're an example of somebody who's extraordinary. So you're already like what's called a positive deviant, which I love
Mm,
that phrase.
me
You're the
too.
bell curve that like there's a whole cool science on that, by the way. Just Google that puppy later. But you're on the bell curve where everyone's like, oh, well, I wish I was over there. And yet you have lots of dreams. So is there anything that if you were on your deathbed tonight, you do that little kicking, like I wished I had taken action on that, or I wished that I had maybe been bolder, or I wish that I had spent more time or this less time doing that? Anything that you might regret? Tiny, tiny, big, big.
Currently, no, but I would share that I've got a book coming out in the fall, and this is very much in line with the topic of that book. And so
Ooh,
I'm coming off on the back of thinking about this really hard for like
okay.
24 months. And
Okay.
the what I realized is that this is not about never having these things crop up, or it's not about never betraying yourself in these small ways. It's about, because that's just not possible to live a life where you never lose track, you're always on point, you never, betray yourself. It's a process not dissimilar to meditation, where your goal is to bring your attention back to the breath or back to the mantra over and over. That's actually the
The
process of
work.
meditation. That's the
Yeah.
work. That is
Yeah.
meditation. By extension,
Yeah.
it is not that we are never going to forget or never going to have small regrets. It's just that when we realize that we are
Mhm.
dangerously close to them, that we take action
Mhm.
to bring ourselves back to
Mhm.
that. And so it's essentially this an ongoing process of becoming ourselves over and over again.
Mhm.
And each time, 1% faster and 1% more authentic than the time before.
Oof,
Like that's the goal.
oof,
So
oof, oof.
I am currently at this place where I feel pretty dang good. And at the same time, 12 months ago, I scrapped everything that I'd written for the year before and wrote an entire book in 6 weeks, specifically because I had realized that I had wandered. And so the
Oh,
things that I am doing right now are the result of this work. And I say that transparently to let you know that if you project I'm the positive deviant or whatever that phrase, which I
yeah.
freaking love,
Yeah.
I'm all over that.
Make a
I'm owning
t-shirt
that
out of
shit.
it.
That's right, for sure. That this positive deviant that you're listening to or watching or paying attention to on the internet still fucks this up over and over again. And the
Oh,
goal is just to have that time be shorter and have your awareness be one click higher every time that you do.
oh gosh. Okay, so now all of a sudden I'm interviewing you here, pal. We all want to know. We all want to hear from you. Chase, tell us. Okay, so this is so exciting because you are so
Yep.
right that your reality of doing that check and then scrapping and then a 6 week flurry of this
Mhm.
is the right click. I'm clicked into gear.
Mhm. Yep.
Wow.
I'll
Congratulations.
tell you a handful of other things that came out of that, and then
Mm.
I'm happy to use myself as a stupid example. But there were like 5 things that I was not doing, and to be fair, I had my company acquired, so I was resting. I had time and space. Basically, was recalibrating after, to like, okay, what's the next chapter going to be like for me? So to be fair, I had set myself up to be able to do that. It was a traumatic, journey to get there. Looks really good on the outside, is very hard on the inside, and I was able to have time and space to
Mm.
actually, make some pretty heartfelt inquiries.
Mm.
And of the things that I listed after that process of, it was very general at first and then it got specific. I encourage people to write stuff down. I have copious notes. I journal every day. And in the journaling, I'm getting clearer and clearer. And there were a half a dozen things. One as an example, which I hope will just be extensible for someone, because someone has this example in their mind. I want to, again, move to Greece, to the thing that you talked about earlier, or start that business or write that manuscript. The thing
Yeah.
that was keeping me from it was basically not having a plan. It's
Mm.
like, okay, cool. The planning takes so much time, and the irony is that I found that it's like 10% planning and 90% doing. And if you could just literally list it in one piece of paper, that's enough to get going. On one
Mm.
sheet of paper,
Mm.
that's enough to get
Mm.
going. So one of those things was the company that I had acquired was essentially an online learning platform. We started it in 2010. It had tens of millions of users, millions of paying
Mm.
customers, and I felt very I liked that business because I had, as a photographer a long time ago, helped people learn photography on the internet. That was a thing. This company helped tens of millions of people do that. I felt great about that until I realized that I'm running a business and I have no interaction with individual human beings. So success was actually this crutch. And so I committed to myself to get back to the sort of the one-on-one, the connections that juiced me, and where I feel like I can have disproportionate impact. Impact with a capital I looks like a scaled business, but impact in my heart felt very different. So again, I didn't realize that just, over a weekend journaling. This is a couple of months. And then I sat there for like 6 months doing nothing with that information.
Hello.
And
Yeah.
in an inspired weekend, I wrote some notes about what a one-on-one coaching program could look like, and I started it the following Friday. So this burst of energy,
Yeah.
this is the product of realizing that there is no time, that you're deferring a future desired state for no freaking reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is the
Oh,
question back to
okay.
you, though. The question back to you is, you talk in your book about habits. I am a habit freak, and I mentioned journaling as part of what got me there, making,
Yeah.
one-page summaries and starting basically before you're ready. Those are some habits that I committed to in order to start to unpack these so I didn't have regrets. You talk about it at length in the book. Give me some perspective.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm so delighted by your example, and your reality. I think we'll refer to it because I think it's super poignant and relatable. I bust on habits. And I think where we're going to maybe net out together is that what you're describing to me is actually a little bit maybe more of a ritual that is useful versus a numbing habit that zones us out and gets us moving into this like autopilot, like zombie zone where we're highly functioning zombies. And that is where the risk, I think, is just even in our day-to-day experience where, in life, like you just go through the motions. And that I say that expression, and I like when I say it, I have that like bark in my mouth feeling because go through the motions. Like I don't think anybody would consciously want that to be a way to describe your life. Like sometimes we need to get stuff done. Like, fine, we're gonna do our quick like dental hygiene routine. Okay, fine. We're all allowed to go through the motions there. And there are some parts of life that like we are allowed to click off. We don't need to be fully engaged and full of gratitude for everything. But when life starts to become a bit of a blur because we have succumbed to habits and routines, they rob us of our aliveness. So it's like the same breakfast, the same route to work, the same, status update meeting agenda that, you've led for years, or, the same meetings, the same date night, the same thing. When you can't really tell like Wednesday from Thursday, they're indiscernible. That's a good idea. A good clue that maybe I need to shake things up a bit. And so, the very easy answer to that is no, not to blow up your life and move to Bali. Not that I would stop you, but it is to just jar things a little, every now and then take one little thing you do. If it's a workout that's always kind of the same, or if it's like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, don't think about it, just do it. What if you did just do something completely different? What if you took the long way home? What if you ordered, Thai meal number 19 instead of number 4, or you just went instead and just did Ethiopian, or you did like just little things that we think are going to be, okay, that's so silly. Is that really going to make a difference? And yet we're just really simple, silly people that as animals that we just sometimes need that jolt of novelty. And research is just super clear around it, that it's one of the building blocks of motivation is having a little bit of novelty and newness in our lives. So I think that can be just a little, to be honest, it's a low hanging fruit, quick tip in order to jar and shake up and enjoy our lives more ultimately. So that to me feels like it's like a grabby routine bit. But I think about like your example of what you were talking about around having this, it was a stretched out epiphany, but you had the epiphany about, wait a minute, like I want to work with human beings, not, this business model that I've created.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you referred to it earlier in our conversation too. It's like allowing yourself to reflect. It's about having that self-awareness, but most of us don't stop to do it. Like, okay, fine. If you hire a coach, well, then it's going to happen within like the first 15 minutes and then you're on your way.
And then
but
you're also
most
like,
of us,
oh,
like this, Right. Talk about the 90-10. Some people don't want to coach because they don't want to see the light, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I know
Yep.
what's around the corner and I don't want it yet. But like this to me is like, okay, so the first part of the book I call the pre-mortem. Obviously, got
Yes.
to use the morbid language, but it's all designed to get you looking at your life and being like, first of all, what's working? Like, I'd be a shitty positive psychology practitioner if I didn't. Okay, fine. Also encourage. Like, if something's working in your life, do even more of it. But more importantly, like, let's diagnose the dead zones. Where are there opportunities? Where are there things like for you? You'd be like, wait a minute. That thing that kind of maybe got me into it when I used to love that initial photography buzz I'd get when I knew that George from Michigan learned how to work the aperture thing,
Yeah.
because that's what it's called, right? The aperture thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Then
Technical term.
you you get to learn about yourself and go, wait a minute. And I think we're also making assumptions even in our conversation, because most of us do have these ideas of dreams or like these regrets in the making, but I don't want to leave behind a huge chunk of people listening right now. And sometimes it's even me where like we lose the plot on what it actually might be like to do something cool. Like we're so busy and we're so swept up, and maybe we've got all the routines. And so we're totally numbed out and we can't see the forest for the trees until we stop and sit down and go, holy shit, like what would be on my bucket list that I will have an asterisk because there will be a deadline? Like, what would I want? Like, what would a dream be? What if I gave myself permission? So I do think that sometimes we have to give ourselves permission to slow down and even imagine what could be fantastic and astonishing in this life, you know? It's not always necessarily that it's right there at the ready. And so we have to excavate it. We have to do what you do. You have to sit and I don't know. I always find a stiff drink helps, but you do you. And like whatever it's going to take to uncover, like this part I think I want more from.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing, like all of us, like, high achievers listening to you right now, we're all here because we want to be more like the positive deviant that you are. And a lot of it is like we're already feeling like some things are good and we want a little more. And that suspicion that, like, could there be more? Like, that's the cavernous space that I'm equally excited by, but also scared of because I feel like, oh, I don't want to get to the end like my mom did with that empty chasm of
Mm.
could there be more? Well, hell yeah, there could have been a lot more there. And but yeah, so let's give ourselves that time and opportunity to pause and stop and think about it
It's
and then
so
get on with it.
it's so important. And I like to try and have some space on the regular rather than uh this, 18-month hiatus that I took. To me, having a regular practice of
Yeah.
reflection, this is one of the reasons I love journaling. And specifically,
Mm.
I prescribe morning pages, which is a phenomenon
Mhm.
and a phrase coined by Julia Cameron from the book The
Yeah.
Artist's Way. This like couple minutes of longhand writing in a journal every morning, just brain dumping. That that again, I love your take on habits, which is very different than most habits that could be this, life on autopilot. If you're getting the results, that's great, but that
Mhm.
actually could turn you into someone who's not dreaming, which is very scary. And I felt like, uh, honestly, I was scared after 12 months of resting after the company was acquired. I thought I was going to
Mhm.
rest for 3. My last day with the
Mm.
big public company that acquired us was in September. I was like, oh, I'm going to cruise through the holidays, take a few months off. It's gonna be and then in the new year, I'm just going to get going again and I'm going to fire up all my mojo. Well, it turns out I was just really freaking tired. I'd been, doing 100-hour weeks for 15 years and that was too hard. So I was afraid that my mojo
Mhm.
was gone, and it was because I did not cultivate it in these small, lightweight ways that you prescribe, despite
Yeah.
helping others understand that that is actually a very valuable practice.
Mm.
I'm advocating driving home a different way from work, trying, I like the example, menu item number 16 on the time menu instead of number 4, the pad thai that you always get. Like, it's in these
But
daily
the pad thai is
lightweight
good. Yeah.
ways. It was true. The
Mhm.
pad thai was
Yeah.
very good, but it's in these daily lightweight ways that we actually experience the
Mhm.
texture of life that keeps, I love your phrase, like this aliveness. The blunting of our aliveness happens through habits, which,
Well, you're getting me now onto thinking about how cool it is that we can build a habit too. So even in this idea of like, for those of us that are like, when you're saying 90-10, a lot of people are like hesitantly raising their hand, like, I think I'm in the 90 and I think I'm really
Yeah.
holding back. And hello, well, first of all, welcome to the club. Membership's free.
Yeah.
And here we are. We're all in it and we all get it. It's normalized. And the good news is that it is a ginormous step, of course, to fathom. Like, if really what you want to do is go back to school and become a veterinary assistant, like that's going to take a couple steps. So, what about doing little things first? Because we have to, in many ways, it's like this, it's an identity shift for ourselves about, and the phrasing in psychology is like, I'm the kind of person who. So sometimes it's just this little thing like, I'm the kind of person who is, willing to maybe take a small risk or do something different or do something that's fun for a change. Or maybe it's I'm the kind of person who is willing to prioritize my own kind of aliveness rather than maybe my spouse or my kids or my aging parent or my team at work that I lead. So sometimes it is like what's the smallest thing you can do? Like registering for the Thursday night journaling online class, for example. Go ahead, do it. It's like finding a small scale. If you're finding, so for example, I just want to take a sec to look at life because we talk about living longer. Yeah, that's great. Maybe if the quality of life's there, but most of us ideally would like to have a good quality of life. So I think of it living wider with vitality and deeper with meaning. And for most of us, we have an inkling when I say those two words, like on a scale of 1 to 10, if you were to evaluate your life according to vitality, like how much fun you're having, how much pleasure, cool, neat experiences, stuff that just, it's fun and frothy. It's like the hedonic well-being. Some of us have a sense right away, like, ooh, that might be a little bit of an area for me or not. And then the same thing when I talk about deepening with meaning, that's the eudaimonic dimension of well-being. And that has the dimension of purpose. Goes back to your example of how like you didn't feel connected to that like sense of purpose for you with the work you were doing. It could also have to do with like good quality connections and relationships with people, maybe spirituality, using your character, like virtues. And so when I ask, okay, scale of 1 to 10, how you doing on that? Many of us also have a sense of, okay, your number. And that gives us also a starting point about, okay, well, if I do want to build a life that I feel like I'm a little bit chicken to do the big things right now, like, oh, for example, break up a long-term relationship or pick up and move or go back to school or change all the big things, which I'm not saying you have to do, but if to build a muscle, you could start slowly and do one thing like, okay, if you said you want more vitality, what would be like a concert in the park you could go to if you're not really doing much these days, or what would be a new meal you could try, or what would be a way to just try a different restorative yoga? I don't know, something that's just a tiny bit different or unique. So I guess my point in this is that we can build up slowly the proof that we're the kind of person where life gets lived around here.
Ooh, I like that. I wonder if we can make the connection that it is the power of novelty that actually facilitates that. Is that too far? Is that too much of a stretch?
I don't think it is. No, the researchers that came up with what's called self-determination theory, it's like one of the heavy hitters in the science of motivation, that it's like purpose and mastery and autonomy and connectedness that really motivates us. They had what I will refer to in my mind always as a cage match where they were debating hotly whether novelty was going to be a big part of that. This experience of like what I connect back to being alive. And novelty did not make the cut in the end, but it is still a really big deal in science. And we overlook it. Like nobody's really talking about it, right? Like indulging your curiosity, forcing yourself to get curious, because again, back to the well-worn path, we just find it easier to do what we always do when we're done work every day. And here's my routine. And consequently, we don't know where the month went.
So in my previous book called Creative Calling, it's basically laid out into 4 chunks. The first, it's a creative process. The acronym is IDEA: imagine, design, execute, and amplify. Imagine what we want, design a plan, execute the plan, and then amplify this by bringing others along on your journey, telling other people about it, recruiting people to help you live your dreams, etc. So to me, that's a creative process we can run on a project or on our lives. In my own experience and now in coaching a lot of people, and especially through process of millions of people participating in Creative Live, imagine is actually more difficult than designing a plan or executing the plan because, there's psychological term, mimetic desire, which is essentially like we want what we see other people having. We're
Mm,
imitating, we're mimicking
mm,
what we see out there.
mm,
And we have largely lost our ability to
mm,
imagine, to think of something that transcends the things that all of our friends are doing, the clothes that all of our friends are
mm,
wearing, the vacations that all of our friends are taking, the careers that all of our friends
mm,
are endeavoring to master.
mm,
What's your
mhm.
take? What's your take on that? Does the science, does the research support that? And how do you think about it?
Mhm. Yeah. As soon as you started saying that, I was nodding in agreement because I do believe that what is laced also with the fathoming step, the imagining step,
Hmm.
we're judging ourselves already. So I think that the idea about comparison's baked into that for sure. I think comparison or inspiration, we could even conflate this because I think sometimes inspiration, like, let's debate hotly, the benefits and the perils of social media. I think sometimes you could see a friend and they are on the Croatian coast, and you could be like, well, first of all, you may you may have feelings of jealousy or envy, but then sometimes that might turn you into like, wait a minute, we haven't taken a trip like that in a long time, and that might be cool. And so sometimes those are helpful nudges to
Hmm.
help inform. I want to do that. I want to add that to the top of my list. But back to this idea about where we can't blast past that is
Hmm.
that usually we get into the headspace of yeah, but like while we're imagining, we talk ourselves out of an idea before we even give it a chance to figure out the how. Because I agree with you, the how, we can hire people for the how, we usually can figure stuff out, and it's usually just like literally taking one step. So if we could just relinquish the judgment about, well, what would my family say, if I did quit this job and go back to school? Okay, also, like, what if you fucking didn't care? Or like, what if you just skipped over the emotion and said, this is something that I think would be great. I'm not going to worry now about what others would think. I'm not going to worry about what I think about me. But if, again, back to, we got to pull out the big guns. I'm on my deathbed. Am I going to be thinking, oh, I'm so glad I didn't try? Or am I going to be thinking, I'm glad I tried. And you know what? Maybe even if it didn't work, which is really one of the things we're afraid of.
Yeah.
Well, is there not a distinct pleasure in giving it a go and feeling proud that you maybe even learned something from it, even if it wasn't astoundingly successful according to whatever metric you've just made up?
Mhm.
That most people would feel like they'd rather have been associated with trying and skinning their knees and getting back up and then getting to the next cool thing than living a life like the unlived life is something that actually contributes to death anxiety. And I don't do a ton of work in anxiety or grief around death. It's more just about the concept of death in this momentum
Mhm.
way.
Mhm.
But the research is just so fascinating to me that a cool side effect of getting on with it and giving our dreams a try is that, oh yeah, if you happen to have a little bit of anxiety about death, it's probably going to be ameliorated a little bit because you're going to at least feel like, oh, you know what? I gave this life a go. Like I showed up for it. It's the sneaking suspicion that we're leaving life on the table that often makes us feel like, oh, I don't want to talk about death. I don't want death to come because I know I'm going to be so busted at whatever my pearly gates I'm getting to or on the deathbed or whatever. I'm going to be busted about like, okay, here's my list of 98 things that I just go, didn't try.
Here's a proof point. So,
Yeah.
as a young person, I basically grew up skateboarding and riding, freestyle BMX biking on, half pipes and in pools and stuff like that. And skateboarding was a big part of my early identity to be able to experience sort of counterculture. It fused music and, graphic arts and spray
Mm,
painting. And, it was just a really interesting aggregate of stuff. And I did a lot. And then I would say as a young adult, sort of past when I really wanted to be riding a vert ramp on a skateboard, I took up longboard skateboarding and just go out late at night and ride big, long, steep hills in the city. And it was so fun and joyful. I felt like I was getting away with something as a 30-year-old. Well, not too long ago, I saw, a skateboard of mine sitting in the corner and I just said, you know what, I'm gonna fashion a go at this again. And my very shortly into this session, I did what we all do is when we try something that's either new or we haven't done in a long time. And I crashed.
Mm.
And the feeling of joy that I received from a skinned knee that lasted weeks, right? You're looking at your skinned knee. The feeling of joy from that, well, I was very close to exponential because it was a signal to myself that I was
Yeah.
willing, it's not about chasing youth. It was that I was willing to,
Yeah.
get on, get on the skateboard again and fail. And
Experience
when I
joy.
remember totally, and it was joyful, the actual event itself. There was a little bit of fear that happened in the crash, and overcoming the fear, you get up, you're like, wait, oh, okay, all my shit's not broken. Okay, cool. Let's do that again. Like I feel very alive right now. And so there was this sort of a self-referential power cycle that I felt like I got in just from trying. And to be clear, I crashed. That's a lightweight failure. I did not feel like a failure. I felt like a success when I looked at my skin knee. It had just the opposite effect that I
Mhm.
would have thought from the couch.
Mhm.
So the
Mm.
difference in perspective from the couch to actually doing something was
Mhm.
material. I expected a feeling of shame and guilt. Oh, I
Mm.
hope I don't crash. That means
Yeah.
I don't have my shit together. I'm not good or as
I'm
as
not as
as
good as I
X or Y.
was.
Yeah, exactly. But it actually had the exact opposite effect. And in turn, that catapulted me into experimenting with a handful of other things that brought me joy in a previous chapter of my life that I was experimenting with now. So the joy
Mm.
coefficient essentially compounded.
Yes.
So my
Oh,
question now, is this a normal pattern? Is this a pattern
yeah.
that most people don't get to because they are not willing to skin their knee the first time?
Yeah.
And I realized that I, again, was very
Mhm.
lucky to have stumbled on this, but it's largely from
Yeah.
this awareness piece. So this is where your book comes in. Is this what the science tells us, that
Yeah.
when we try this, we actually crave more of it, or is there something that I'm missing?
It's totally craveable. And you gave yourself a taste of something
Hmm.
that had been a while. And this
Hmm.
was an indication of that, like you said, that like this brilliant aliveness. And if anything, this skin knee was, like you said, it was like an emblem of, and this is reminding me, of course, and it's been like a solid 4 minutes since we've talked about death. So, all roads lead back to this with me. Conveniently, I'm going to talk for a minute about this idea about having like a near-death experience or a brush
Hmm.
with death. So I'm not trying to say that your, fall off your skateboard meant that you were like on the brink. But what it's we're on opposite. We're on a continuum here though, and
Sure.
this idea about like you had like a pretty jolting experience that was like a very refreshing in a way experience, like a wake up. And people who've had a near death experience or just on the softer side, what's called a brush with death. And it could be like an illness, or you're in remission, or you had a close call car accident, something that made you go, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like that, I could have almost died, this morning or
Hmm.
yesterday, or when I was in the hospital last week. And the learnings from research that come out of that are so unbelievably phenomenal. There is usually what's called sort of like a burst of aliveness. And it's not
Hmm.
true for everybody. So someone listening right now might be like, well, I didn't have that. I got ripped off after my, cancer remission. Well, your results may vary. But what you had, like this jolt of aliveness, psychologists call it a roar of awakening.
Hmm.
And I recognize I'm using hyperbole here with a near death experience to illustrate, but let's use it. Like when people who have almost lost it get to come back and go, holy shit, like now I'm seeing how precious life is. Not only
Hmm.
does just appreciation for life increase, which is just a nice state to be in of gratitude, but they get so clear on what matters in their life and then what doesn't matter. So they just kind of like shed the trivial stuff that most of us are consumed by. When did I get back to that email on time? Or, oh, like the things you feel obligated to say yes to, or whatever's holding you back. Versus, I now, no, 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 that stuff doesn't matter anymore because I see that this does. And I now see that, like, maybe, in one scenario of your life, it could have been if you'd had a near death experience at this time, like, yeah, 100 hours a week for this, not the way I want to live my life anymore. It served me up till now. It's all for a good cause for different reasons, some of which may have been chalked under the lessons learned category. But I now know what I want. I now see with such clarity that this stuff's gold. and I've been treating it like bronze, or I've been, see, like my Olympic reference, but like
Or
I've
worse.
not
Yeah.
been really taking it seriously. And so, or maybe I've been taking it too seriously, depending on your kind of your mindset in life these days. So yeah, I feel like how do we skin our, how do we purposely skin our knees in these conscious ways? That's a great wake up call for you.
This, but this is what I love about your book. Again, for those, I've got it open in front of me, so I have the benefit here. You only die once. How to make it to the end with no regrets. I have also had and written about at length a near-death experience, and it was in an avalanche. Don't need to go into it, but the my my desire that stemmed from this was, man, it seems like we don't need to require a near-death experience in order
Hmm.
to do this. And your
Yeah.
book is a fantastic substitute for anyone who wants the benefits without almost dying. The book is very, very adroit at getting you on this path. That was literally my wish. And that kicked me into a hole that actually helped me start the company that I was talking about, for
Mm.
example. But the cool thing is that you don't actually have to have that. There, you have the
Mhm.
intellectual understanding, and you have a
Yep.
set of, you have time, wherewithal, you have discipline, you
Mm.
have motivation, inspiration, and an actual freaking
Mhm.
roadmap here with your book
Yeah.
that you don't have to almost die. So take it from the
Yeah.
person who has almost died that you don't need it. And for $20 or whatever, it's like way easier, way less traumatic. You don't need therapy
Yeah.
afterwards.
No hospital bills
No
and
hospital. Yeah,
it's
exactly.
less therapy. Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. And you're like, we're on the same wavelength because that's kind of my hope is like, how do we not have to almost die? And there's no substitute. Okay, so let's be super honest. Like if I'm being honest, I'm so freaking envious of people like you who've had an experience
Ugh.
that allowed you to well, yeah, right. You'd be like, careful what you wish for. And
Exactly.
yeah. Would you go well, here's a question. Like, the whole story of life. Like, would you go back and do things over? If you
Mm.
could go back, would you wash that from the experience from your life or would you let it
No, no,
happen?
no. I would certainly let it happen, especially knowing that you'd survive. Stakes are pretty high.
Hmm.
But if I could be certain that I would thrive, what's the phrase? Like, if you were going to, um, tell someone a story about how you make a strong, resilient human, would the story say you get everything you want, when you want it, how you want it, without
Mm.
effort
Yeah.
or with minimal effort, and you could just maintain your ideal height and weight and maintain a level head and maintain all of these things? Like, there's no way that that would be the prescription that would create a strong, resilient, and passionate, connected, life living human being. That's not how they're made.
Yeah.
So if you
Yeah.
want this life, you
That
have to sort of be willing to do these other things. That's the trade.
Yes, it is a trade. You're reminding me of something. I won't even try and refer to the specific study, but from it was within the last century. Have you heard of the experiment machine? There was this idea that
Mm,
they came up with for a psychological study. And the question posed was, okay, if you could plug yourself into a machine and it would guarantee that everything always felt really good, you'd always just be happy. But you'd be impervious to all the highs and lows of life, like that are like, I kind of like reality, but you would always just be at this state of like, la la la, like life's good. What, that's the face you'd have to make.
there you go.
What percent of people do you think would be like, plug me in all the time? What percent?
I would think it would be high, but I think this is where you're going to get me.
You can tell you're,
Right.
you're good at this game. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It surprised me too, because I thought it was going to be high. Why don't I just tell you what the percent was? Well, 19%. And that for me was like this, wait a sec, because like most of us, well, we're numbing ourselves and we're like trying to find quick hits and hacks and ways. And I mean, I'm part of a culture of like, let's try to be happy before we die, of course. But it also shows that there is this willingness to go for the ride of knowing that it's the poignancy that comes from the lows that make the highs high. And that,
Yeah.
even positive psychology, there's criticism sometimes like, toxic positivity, but that's not really what the science is based on. It's this sort of dichotomy, and it's this recognition that, oh, there's going to be a lot of shit, and there's going to be grief and pain and loss and tears and suffering and all the things, and like stub toes, everything. And it's beautiful because it's part of the stew. It's all just part of it. And that's what makes us sometimes grateful the day that we didn't wake up with a migraine, or the day that, we didn't die. I don't know if we give ourselves enough credit for that one every morning. Like, hallelujah, I made
Didn't
it.
die. Not underground.
I didn't. Yeah. Yeah. But this recognition, like, it's part of the experience. And yeah, if the biggest downer of all is that, like, this ride, as long as we know it's going to end, let's just keep focusing back on that. Like you say, meditation, let's focus back on the breath or the whatnot. It's like, that's the work of, wait a minute, I'm taking it for granted again. I'm taking it for granted. This is going to be I'm on a countdown timer. Don't dwell there. And now let that be the animating force to say, I'm going to sign up for pickleball lessons, which may be your choice. You do you.
Very grateful for our time together. The book is The Only Die Once: How to Make It to the End with No Regrets. Thank you so much, Jodi, for being a guest on the show. Your work is wickedly inspiring. And as I mentioned, it came at a really interesting time for me. And it's a treat. Where, if we were still people, I'm steering people to the book. And you have a picture of the Grim Reaper water skiing, by the way, on the cover of the book. If is there anywhere else you would steer our attention other than the book, which is, to me, that's amazing. But there's anything else?
Oh, thanks for asking. Yeah, I mean, 4,000 Mondays is where all my stuff is. There's a Monday calculator there if you don't want to waste your precious life doing mortality math. So like on the resource page, you could count your Mondays, blog posts, lots of fun. And yeah, 4,000 Mondays. Thank you for asking.
Of course. And again, the work is meaningful, powerful, and death is a great motivator, assuming you can get into, like, inside the head of yourself, right? The chapters in the book talk about regrets, habits, living with meaning and purpose. I enjoyed the paint by numbers, specific actions to take to live in vivid color, all wonderfully crafted for us. Thank you so much for putting that work out into the world, for being a guest in the show. You're always welcome here. Keep doing the good work. And from Jodi and myself, signing off from Toronto and the Pacific Northwest, signing off until next time. Thanks for listening.